Hello and welcome to another Global News Alliance training session. Our topic today is editing, also known as post-production. After the footage has been captured, the interview sound bites have been selected, and the voiceover narration has been recorded, it's time to put it all together using a video editing software application. This is actually one of my favorite parts of the production process, and it's an opportunity to really be creative. I trust that you were successful in downloading and opening the VN editing app on your smartphone. The VN app will also work on a tablet or on a desktop or laptop, and if that's available to you, you may find that the larger screen is a benefit during the editing process. The screenshots that I've included in this tutorial will be from the desktop version of VN, so it may look a little different on your phone or tablet. Different editing software apps tend to be very similar. So whether you're using the VN app or Adobe Premiere or LumaFusion, you'll find that the process is quite similar. There's always an area where you import your raw footage, your video clips, your audio clips, still photos, and graphics. Then there's a viewing window where you can see your program as you're building it. And underneath that typically is the timeline made up of several tracks, including a video track, several audio tracks, typically below that. With VN, you have a dedicated track for titles or text graphics, and then above that, you have a separate track for music. We'll get to that in just a minute, but I hope that you were able to download the app and hopefully explore it a little bit. Once you begin using VN or any other app to edit, you'll find that you need to know how to do a particular task. But take heart, there are many tutorials online. I find myself watching tutorials on YouTube quite frequently to learn new things. And there's always that one thing that I want to do that I can't seem to find a tutorial for. So that's where it's nice to know someone who has experience or expertise. So I'm happy to do that kind of one-on-one basis with you. So don't hesitate to contact me with your questions. Let me begin by saying that editing, also known as video post-production, can be looked at in one of two ways, and I like the example of a mosaic or a sculpture. Everyone who knows what a mosaic is knows that it's a piece of art that's created by adding little bits and pieces in the right places in the right order. It could be little bits and pieces of ceramic pottery, it could be stones, it could be gems, it could be any number of things, but you're building it up by placing small bits in the right places. It's what we would describe as an additive process. In contrast to a mosaic, editing can be compared to the process of making a sculpture. I think it may have been Michelangelo when asked how you create a sculpture. He said, you just start with a block of granite and you chip away everything that isn't the thing that you're sculpting. This would be a subtractive process. I mean, the famous sculpture of King David, it just amazes me to this day that somebody can take a chisel and hammer and carve that out of a solid block of granite. But you can think of editing in that sense as well. You start with all of the raw material and you take away the parts that don't add to the story. You take away the extraneous or unnecessary parts as you chisel or whittle it down to something that fits the time that you have available. And that's a big part of what video editing is about. It's taking and reducing something to a manageable length. You might start with a 12-minute interview with an important person who's telling their part of the story. You might have 10 minutes of B-roll footage, and then you might have images or graphics to help illustrate the point. And if you added it all together end to end, it might be 20 to 30 minutes of material from which you have to produce a 1.5 to 2.5 minute video piece. Well, that's where editing comes in. You take out all of the unnecessary stuff and you're left with the essentials necessary to tell the story. A lot of editing then is editing for time, to reduce time, and I want to show you just a couple of short clips that demonstrate this idea of using editing to reduce the duration of an event by using a series of shots. This is not my footage, it's something that I found online, and it's a woman making a crepe. If you know what a crepe is, I think it's French, but it's a very thin griddle cake. We start with a single shot of her making a single crepe, and it lasts for about a minute. Okay, that was 1 minute and 6 seconds. But as you can see, there was a lot of wasted time. So let's suppose your news story is about a famous chef and her specialty is crepes, and you want to show her actually in the kitchen making one. But you can't afford 1 minute to show it in real time, so you want to cut out the unnecessary parts. So here's the same clip with unnecessary parts cut out and transitions, or what VN calls motion, used to switch from shot to shot. Now I could have just cut out the unnecessary parts and left a jump cut at each point. A jump cut is simply a change in the shot where the framing and the composition stay the same, but whatever's in the shot changes. No doubt you're familiar with jump cuts. So now it is shorter, but visually it's not all that interesting. Let me show you an even shorter version that's made up of a series of individual shots. I think there's probably 6 or so shots that are taken from different angles and use different framing to show the same process. Okay, that was only 18 seconds long, and I think you would agree that it was much more interesting visually, and it showed the same process that we watched in the very first clip, which was over 1 minute long. So we ended up reducing the duration to 1/3, maybe even 1/4 of the full length, and visually it was much more interesting. And it even included a very creative shot where the phone was under a piece of clear plastic and the batter was being poured right on top of that. Now that shot is a little gimmicky, but a very effective way to make you watch and look and take notice of what's happening there. So before I start jumping into more of the details about editing, I want to show you a piece that breaks every rule about editing that we've talked about so far. What I just told you was that editing is often used to reduce the unnecessary parts and reduce the length of a full piece. Well, I'm going to show you a piece that you'll notice hopefully within about 20 or 30 seconds into it, you're going to notice that this is a piece unlike most any other news story you've ever seen. This was shot and produced by a reporter out of Texas, Mike Castellucci, and he's a very effective storyteller. I don't know if he claims to be a believer, but this piece is very much about God at work in somebody's life. Regardless, he's able to tell this story of faith very effectively. Take a look.
Depends on the week, but she's usually here every day. You could say she's the voice of this church. We all have a routine. Crystal Yates is no different. She comes here to work and practice, and she tends to inspire people. They probably wish they had what she has. So much faith.
So this is where my husband Will and I work and lead worship at every Sunday. This is Christ Fellowship in McKinney, Texas.
And this is also a slice of someone's life. A few minutes unedited. It isn't rehearsal. It's life. Crystal feels different here these days because not long ago,
Honestly, I was not sure.
she didn't know if she'd ever come back here again.
COVID.
21 days staring at the hospital ceiling. She couldn't believe it.
No, I couldn't. It was surreal.
Crystal has belted it out on the Grand Ole Opry stage, won a national competition there. Now, she couldn't catch her breath for another reason.
There were moments I felt that God was close as my next breath, and there were other moments I could not feel God's presence with me at all.
21 days in the hospital.
It was very scary.
But on day 11, an angel appeared. In white?
I think she had blue on, actually. Yes, this sweet nurse, one of the many nights I'd been discouraged, this sweet nurse woke me up after just long prayers, and she had told me, "You're going to get better, you're going to get out of the hospital." Then she put all these Bible verses all around my bed. When I woke up, I saw them all, and they were verses that really meant a lot to me, like, "Don't be afraid, fear not."
Angel or nurse or both. It helped her get here.
Yes, there's a special place Will and I love to sing and worship in.
Well, not exactly here, but they'll show you where they go.
And the winner of $100,000 and the title Best New Act in Country Music is Crystal Yates.
I had been talking to a friend one night, and I had to get off of the phone with her because my oxygen levels were desaturating so low, it would set my alarms off.
She's won big in life. Folks might think she's never had to question her faith.
If I can't even talk, will I ever get to sing again?
But she's human.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden I heard this little voice just deep down in my heart say, "Why don't you go ahead and try and sing now?" And I thought, that's crazy. And I did start singing, and when I did, my oxygen levels began to rise.
Crazy. Could barely talk but listen to a voice that said sing.
I couldn't. It was really like a miracle.
She always believed in those, but never tested like this.
I really learned that hope is very important. And also I learned that everybody in the world could be praying for me, because everybody was. I was getting hundreds of messages. And all these people from all over that I didn't even know praying for me. And, but I heard that little voice again say, "You have to believe for you. You've got to believe. It doesn't matter if everyone in the world believes if you don't believe." And so I began to dare to believe and sing, and little by little I got better. Yeah.
So it turns out she missed this house of worship, but she found clarity in a hospital room. Oh, and here's the place they love to practice.
And all my life you have been faithful. And all my life you have been so good. With every breath that I am able, oh, I'm gonna sing of the goodness of God. Oh, your goodness is running after, it's running after me.
She's feeling better most days, still clearing pneumonia from her lungs. Grateful she's standing in her church stairwell for acoustics instead of listening to the metronome of the intensive care unit.
I give you everything.
This is celebration.
Your goodness is running after, it's running after me.
This is liberation.
Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me.
With Brandon Maurer,
Your goodness is running after,
I'm Mike Castellucci.
running after me.
All right, what did you notice about that piece that's different from every other news feature? By the way, it's what we refer to as a soft news feature. It's longer than a typical news story. It's over 5 minutes long. It's soft in the sense that it's not hard news. It's not fact-driven or time-sensitive. It's about a particular woman's experience dealing with COVID and recovering from that through what she would claim to be a miraculous touch of God in her life. But what is the thing about this piece that makes it so different from every other news piece that you've ever seen? Well, give yourself a point if you notice that it was one continuous take from beginning to end. That's it, one video shot from beginning to end. The only edits were when he inserted his voiceover narration between the nat sound or natural sound bites that he recorded in that single take. So when you talk about editing and chopping things up and building a sequence of shots, I just wanted to let you see that with this type of creativity and thinking outside the box, editing doesn't have to follow a formula. In this case, this took some pre-planning. I talked to Mike about it, and I think he said they did it on the second take, that they ran all the way through from beginning to end. But he had to be very careful in planning out that single take and where he was going to insert his voiceover narration. Well before you begin editing, the process begins by shooting for the edit. All that really means is, while you're shooting, you're thinking about how each shot is going to contribute to the finished piece. This becomes a lot easier to do after you've shot and edited many pieces, but even for someone starting out, it's a good thing to be thinking about. So before you shoot, or while you're shooting, think about the edit. Think about all of the process of cutting these shots together to build the story. So when you go out on a shoot, you're thinking, I need sound bites, I need B-roll, I need nat sound. These are the ingredients that you're going to use to make the finished product. The ingredients necessary to make the cake, if you will. If you're a chef, you need to gather all your ingredients and then you start combining them, then you start cooking. So what are the ingredients? Well, first, interview sound bites. Sound bites are short segments extracted from longer interviews. You might interview someone for 5 minutes or 15 minutes. But what you really need is a 10-second soundbite about this, a 15-second soundbite about that, and a 7-second soundbite about another thing. You need these short, succinct statements from your interviewee, and each soundbite is going to convey an important part of the story. The soundbites will be used to punctuate the story that you're going to provide through your narration. And that's the second thing, the voiceover narration. By the way, the order of things is you write out the interview questions, you conduct the interview, you listen to the interview recording to identify the usable sound bites, and then you write the narration. You can write the narration before you do the interview, but you'll probably have to revise it after you choose your interview sound bites. Okay, so interview sound bites are the first ingredient. Narration, or sometimes called voiceover or VO, is the second part of that. These two things together, the sound bites and your voiceover narration, make up the A-roll. Most of the time we just talk about B-roll, and we seldom talk about A-roll, but what the A-roll is the essential footage that has the soundtrack that tells the story. So A-roll is sound bites and narration. B-roll is the visuals that show what the A-roll is talking about. So the third ingredient is B-roll footage. B-roll is frequently shot on location after the interview is complete. Another element used to tell a news story is nat sound, or ambient sound. Nat sound, which is very important, is usually captured while you're shooting B-roll, but it can be captured separately. So what do we mean by nat sound? We're talking about the sound of the things happening that you're reporting about. So if you're reporting about a music festival, it would be the sound of music being played in the arena or on that location. If you're reporting about a weather event, certain kinds of weather produce certain kinds of sounds, and those would be important. If it's a rainstorm and a flood, you want the sound of rushing water and torrential rain. Nat sound is just the natural sound that accompanies your footage to make it more realistic. The next ingredient is graphics. These could be full frame graphics that fill the entire screen and show something that's hard to visualize without seeing animation or graphics portraying it. Or it could be just the lower third name supers used to identify key interviewees. And finally, depending on the type of news piece, music may be appropriate. In certain kinds of news stories, especially softer news, music might add an audio dimension that adds to the overall effect without being distracting. A word of caution though, one needs to be careful to not use music to manipulate the audience's emotions. So let's talk about the process after shooting before you actually start editing. Several things typically happen after shooting and before editing begins. First, you review the interview and you listen for the best sound bites. You listen for information that might inform your narration script and you make notes to that effect. Next, you review the B-roll footage and make notes about the best shots. Perhaps you repeated a particular shot 2 or 3 times to make sure you got it covered well, and now's the time to make a note to confirm which is the best. Basically, you're just making notes to yourself about what the best footage is. Next, you write the script and record your voiceover narration. Your voiceover narration is what's going to carry the story. The narration will be punctuated by interview sound bites that help you tell the story from eyewitnesses or people who are central to the story. Scripted narration, based on your research and information gathered during the interview, will carry the story. However, the sound bites lend an air of authority and credibility when the interviewees, who are often eyewitnesses, tell the story from their perspective. When it comes time to record your narration, you can record on your phone just like you record a voice memo. It's best to use a good audio app that will save a high-quality recording. I have one called Voice Recorder, and it saves a WAV file, so it's a pretty good quality voice recording. If you have a better quality microphone, that's even better to record your voiceover narration. VN also has a feature that allows you to record a voiceover directly in the app. Just press on the audio track and then select Record. Tap the Record button. This is a voiceover recorded directly in the VN video app. Now, with the voiceover recorded, this is a voiceover recorded directly in the VN video app. Once you have your soundbite selected and your voiceover narration written and recorded, it's time to start assembling the story. I recommend that you begin by laying down the audio from beginning to end. You basically establish the A-roll for your piece, and then you go back and insert the B-roll on the next track above the A-roll to provide a visual explanation of the events being discussed. The B-roll can also be used to cover up jump cuts in the sound bites. People have asked, well, how long should a particular B-roll shot last? My rule of thumb is, when you're shooting B-roll, make sure you record each shot for at least 10 seconds. So there's the raw footage, you should have at least 10 seconds of it, whatever it is. But then you'll edit from that raw footage and use just a snippet of that. Maybe it's 2 seconds, maybe it's 4 seconds, maybe it's 6 seconds. If it's a shot that involves camera motion, like a pan or a tilt, I would generally say do a 10-second move of the camera from beginning to end. So 2 seconds, do the pan or tilt, then hold for 2 seconds. And then you can use just the part in the middle, you can use just the beginning, or you can use just the end, or some combination. But when you edit it into the piece, the length of time really depends on the subject matter, because certain B-roll shots are more complex and require more processing on the part of the audience to understand what they're seeing. If it's a very simple shot, 2 seconds, 3 seconds could be plenty. But if it's something that's more complicated, you might need 4 to 5 seconds. I would say for most B-roll shots, not less than 2 seconds and not more than 5 seconds most of the time. That's a general rule, but again, it depends on the complexity of what's in the shot. Next, you add graphics and visual transitions if necessary. Generally, cuts are the best and most common transitions, with occasional cross dissolves. Wipes, defocuses, light flares can sometimes be used effectively, but the general rule is less is more. The last step in the editing process includes mixing sound levels, color correction or color grading, and what that means is simply adjusting the white balance or the brightness or contrast of your video clips. Then, review the finished piece, make sure it accomplishes what you intend, maybe show it to a friend, and then export your video in the format and according to the specifications of your client. The editing app that I'm recommending is VN, simply because it's free, it's multi-platform, and it's quite good. There are editing apps that are better, and there are some that are also free, but of the free editing apps out there, VN seems to be one of the best. You may have heard of CapCut, which is another very powerful phone-based editing app, but I don't use it because they're owned by the same people who own TikTok. And you have to be careful where your data goes when you're using some of these free apps from certain countries. So the VN video editing app, I'll provide some simple descriptions of how to use the app to perform simple video editing of your news story footage. Even this basic app, however, is quite powerful. So to learn more about it, I would highly recommend that you watch a couple of YouTube tutorials. One that I highly recommend is from Primal Video, and it is their updated tutorial for beginners published in late 2023. So now you should have the VN app downloaded on your phone, and hopefully you've opened it up and you've taken a look at it. One of the first things you have to do when you're ready to start a new project on VN, you have to press the button down in the bottom corner. It's a blue button with a plus sign. This will take you to a screen that has another button that says New Project. Once you press that, it will take you to your camera roll, and that's the place on your phone where your photos and videos are stored. When you select clips in the camera roll, it will order them 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. However many you select. So let's suppose that you select 5 of them. 1 will be labeled 1, then 2, then 3, etc. So here I've selected 5 clips, and they have a little blue circle, and they're numbered 1 through 5. The idea is to select them in the order that you plan to use them in your piece, but sometimes you don't always know, and you can rearrange them later. But it's good, if you can, to select them in the order that you want to use them. When you click Next, it drops those 5 clips into the timeline. So the timeline is the part right down here, and you can scroll forward or back through that. As I do, the monitor picture changes to show which clip I'm on. At the top, you'll see something that right now says Original, but it gives you multiple choices. Original matches the source material. 1:1 is a square video aspect ratio, and it also has social media icons there. TikTok, you can see, is the third one over. Next is a YouTube symbol, and YouTube is 16:9. Then it has Instagram, which is 4:5. There's a bunch of choices. So we're working on the assumption that for video stories produced for GNA, that you're going to deliver the final product in 1080 16:9 aspect ratio. If that's what you selected for your phone settings, you could choose Original now that it's time to edit. So you can stay in the Original, or you can select YouTube 16:9, and it will be the same thing if you shot horizontally with your phone at 1080. Now, when you selected several video clips, it put them in order on the main video track. If you look right below the main video track, you'll see a waveform of the audio that accompanies that video. Above the main video track is where the B-roll or overlays are inserted. The next track above that is titles, and the next track above that is music. You can expand and contract the timeline by pinching or squeezing the timeline. So if you want to see more detail, if you want it to be larger and you need more precise control over where your in point and out point is, you can expand the timeline by pinching it out, or you can pinch it together to make the timeline contract. Take a look at this example of an editing timeline. The main video track is the one that's indicated as A-roll. This track contains clips from an interview, and the man in the t-shirt is being interviewed. You can see there are multiple cuts, and there are about 8 clips in the A-roll track. So that we don't have a whole bunch of jump cuts, we inserted 4 B-roll shots in the B-roll track above that. The blue tracks below the main audio are the audio waveform indicating audio that accompanies the main video tracks or A-roll tracks. The tracks below that are probably music or nat sound. When you build video tracks one above the other, whatever's on top is what you see in the final output. The top video track hides whatever's below it. But in the case of audio, it doesn't hide what's below it. You hear all the audio on all the tracks. So that's something you have to be careful of, and you'll want to pay attention to. There's one thing that you're going to want to be able to change, and that is the volume of certain audio clips. You're going to want some audio to be louder, and other audio, for instance, nat sound or background sound, to be quieter. And you do that by adjusting the volume of the clip. Sometimes you'll want the volume of the audio to change from loud to quiet or quiet to loud, and for that you need to use keyframes. Keyframes, whether it's for audio or video, simply allow you to identify a part of a clip where you want something to change. In this instance, we'll use keyframes to change the audio volume. Here's a case where we want the nat sound to start at full volume and then become quieter as the interviewee begins to speak. Another very important concept is what's called J or L cuts. A J cut or an L cut, if you think about the letter J or the letter L, what we're basically saying is that the audio and video cut at different places. In other words, we hear the audio before the video appears, or we see the video before the audio begins. The cut doesn't happen on the same frame. They're offset. Either the audio precedes the video or the audio follows the video. That's called a J-cut or an L-cut, depending on whether it precedes it or follows it. The reason why J-cuts are often used is because of the way that we behave naturally when a sound catches our attention. First, we hear the sound, and then we turn to look at the source of the sound. It's actually a very natural transition to hear audio before you see what is producing that audio, and that's where you want to use a J-cut. I'm not going to say much about stock footage, but know that there are places you can find and locate B-roll footage that you might not be able to shoot on your own, but might be useful to your story. When you don't have access to shoot a particular shot, you might consider looking for stock footage that you can use. Here's a short segment from a video that I produced that is about artificial intelligence, and it uses some stock footage that I was unable to shoot myself.
No doubt you've heard about artificial intelligence, but what is it, and why should the church care?
Artificial intelligence, AI, refers to the simulation of human intelligence in machines that are programmed to think and mimic human-like cognitive functions.
Artificial intelligence is growing at a rate faster than any previous technology. The rapid advancement is enabling innovative...
That piece was about artificial intelligence and the church, but some of those shots at the very beginning were stock footage. The laptop computer was footage that I shot, but starting with the AI graphic, the clip of the gal with the code on the screen, and this shot of them looking at a screen, that's not something that I had easy access to shoot. So I got those from a stock footage library, and I think they worked out okay. By the way, the voiceover narration that you heard in the piece, and let me play a short clip for you just again real quickly.
No doubt you've heard about artificial intelligence, but what is it, and why should the church care?
Artificial intelligence, AI, refers to the simulation of human intelligence in machines that are programmed.
That's an AI-generated voiceover and is from a website called 11labs.io. The male voiceover narration and the woman's voice at the beginning, giving a definition of artificial intelligence. That was also an AI voice that was generated by that same website. So I just typed in my script, selected the kind of voice that I wanted, and downloaded the file and edited it into the piece. So just so you know, there are alternatives to voicing a piece yourself. Like any skill worth developing, video editing takes practice. Go out and shoot an interview and some B-roll and then start editing that footage using the editing app on your phone. If you start editing in the next few days or weeks and you get stuck, and if you're wondering how can I do that or is that possible, I'm happy to respond either by text message or email, and I'll be happy to walk you through the process. We also encourage you to visit the GNA News website where you can find additional training resources. Just click on the training link and select the smartphone reporting option in the menu. Here you'll find resources including the smartphone tips card. You'll also find helpful tips on how to identify news stories, what to do when shooting on location, and how to conduct successful interviews, and the very important process of scripting and editing your news stories. As always, we're united in our goal and purpose. Our mission at Global News Alliance is to tell the greatest story ever told and to equip others to tell their stories using the available technology. Thank you for watching, and God bless you.